Hey everybody, welcome to Bill Sky, the COBOL guy, and this is our second video in this series. And in this video, we're going to write our very first COBOL program. I'm going to explain some of the syntax of it, some of the sections, the divisions, things like that. But we're going to be getting more into those as the course goes on. So I think we should just get right to it and build our first COBOL program. Now, this video is assuming that you went through the previous video where you set up your COBOL compiler, either the GNUCobol or the IBM COBOL compiler. If you haven't done that, please look at the 01 COBOL or the COBOL 01 introduction and setting up your computer video. It'll go through all that. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to do a demonstration on Linux, and then I'm going to do the demonstration on Windows using Windows Subsystem for Linux. So we're going to do both. Now on the Linux version, I'm going to show how you can use GNUCobol or IBM's COBOL, because they are different and you'll see a big difference there. However, when we get to Windows, we're just going to use the GNU because I never set up my system, my Windows subsystem for Linux with IBM COBOL. And if I get people asking me to create a video for that, I will definitely do that. But it works exactly the same, you just have different tools. Okay, so I have Linux up here and running right now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a directory. I'm going to go into my documents, and you can do this any way you wish. I'm going to go into COBOL projects, and I actually have a Hello World document or a Hello World project there, but I want to do things from scratch. I don't want to do things, I just show you the code and then, hopefully you get it. So I'm going to call this Hello World 2, and from within there, I'm going to create a document, and I'm going to call this document main.cbl. Now, CBL pretty much stands for COBOL. I've used COB before, but CBL seems to be the way to do it. And let's make sure that it is main.cbl and not main.cbl.txt. So, okay, so that's great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and I'm going to open it up with Genie. Now, Genie is a great editor for COBOL. You can actually run make files, which we're going to do in this course, and it does text highlighting. So let's get going. So the first thing that I need to let you know about COBOL is that COBOL has, every line of code in a COBOL program has a section. It has, so like for instance, the first six characters of a line of COBOL is a line number. So let's actually do that. So I'm going to go back here, and let's close this one. I don't want to be tempted to look at my own work. And so the first six characters is a line number. So line numbers are there back when you had punched cards. And you'd be walking around campus, or you'd be walking around your company with your punch cards. A bully would trip you. Not that this ever happened to me, but a bully would trip you. You'd dump all your punched cards. They'd go flying all over the place. And if you didn't have card numbers on your cards, then oops, you're going to have to hand sort every single one. Hopefully you have a printed page of your program, but oh my God, unbelievably difficult. So what they have is they have the first six characters is a card number. Now the seventh character is what we call a comment or a indicator column. So by putting an asterisk in there, that means that whole line is a comment. And then after that, you'll have area A. So we're going to put a space there. So actually, let's put an asterisk there. Area A is columns 8 through 11. So 8, 9, 10, 11. So you've got 4 characters in area A. Why? Because certain statements within a COBOL program must start in a certain area of the card or of the record. So the first, 8, 9, 10, yeah, it's 4. So the first one is area A. Area B goes all the way to column 72, which is right here. And then the indentation area is 73 through 80. And the indentation area is normally meant for identification of that line of code. So let me try to explain this. So area A is where things like, and you'll see this in just a moment, where things like division names, section names, things like that, which we're going to go over in just a moment, they have to start in area A. In area B, this is where you actually put your code, where you actually will put your data definition lines possibly, or your actual logic of your program. And then this identification area, which is columns 73 through 80, that might have like the programmer's initials or their employee number or something, because back then, and even today, who wrote that code? Who put that line of code in there that destroyed the universe, right? You need to know who that is, because you may need to ask them, why are you destroying the universe? So those aren't used so much anymore. Because with things like Git and PVCS and other version management systems, you know who wrote the code. You may not know what it is that they did, but you know who last checked out the code. And so those really aren't as necessary as they used to be. But we're going to leave that there just for your information. So let's actually get to the first line of code. And the first line of code for any program, for any COBOL program, is what we call the identification division. So let's go ahead and put in some line numbers. I know you're going to be just sick of these line numbers, but bear with me. We've got a way to get away from them in GNUCobol. However, IBM COBOL and other COBOL compilers, because they have to be compatible with the 800 billion lines of code that are out there, COBOL code, you need to have those line numbers in there. So the first thing you want to do is, there's this thing called the identification division. Now the identification division is just what you think. It identifies the program. Who was the author? When was it written? What operating system was it written for? What hardware was it written for? Remarks about the program. It's like a lot of comments. Now that doesn't mean you can't put comments inside other areas of the program, but the identification division really defines who did the program, why, what was it for, things like that. When was the last time it was updated? And that's how COBOL is built. COBOL is built on divisions, on sections. And I actually find that extremely understandable, because you know where all of the data is defined. You know where all of the files are defined. You know where all of the information about the program is located. And so the identification division is the first one. Now, something that I like to do is I like to create a program ID. Now, this is really necessary. The program ID, let's just say hello world. The hello world program ID means that that is the name of the program. So if somebody else wants to call your program, it's like a function name, that's the name they're going to use, in this case hello world. Now the other thing I wanted to make you aware of is notice the periods at the end of the sentences. That is much like the C, C++, Java of the semicolon. But it's simply a period. The period simply means that's the end of that section of information. That's the end of that string. So here's our program ID of hello world. Let's put in another line of code. So after program ID, you may want to put in the author. Okay, so you can see the author is Bill Sky, the COBOL guy. It's not put in double quotes. It's actually this data between the space after the period of author and the period at the end of the string. So that's the author. Now, not all of these are required. I'm going to show you a very, very small version of this program. Now, the other thing you might be wondering is, why am I making my numbers so big? I mean, why did I start at 100? Why am I going 100 every one? Well, that's so you can insert lines in between. So for instance, let's say if I forgot something here and I wanted to put something in between 400 and 500, I could call it 000450. So that line would be in between, but we're not going to do that. Now again, I'm just showing you these lines to get these line numbers to get used to it. You don't have to use them on GNUCobol, but like I said earlier, on some of the other COBOLs you do. Then there's some other things, date written. That's actually interesting to know. So let's say, what is the date today? The date today is the 21st. You might also have date compiled, or date, I don't know, date, yeah, compiled. So then if you were to make changes to the program, you would change the date compiled. And then this is my favorite one, remarks. The remarks says, what is this program all about? This program and then I put a period at the end. Okay? Okay, so that's the identification division. Now there's a whole lot more to it than that, but that's really not the minimum. Really the minimum would be just those 2 lines of code. But we're going to do all of the lines of code just to get you used to it. Okay, so I'm going to put in a blank line, and then just make that a comment line. And the next division is going to be the environment division. And now what the environment division does is that it identifies the type of computer, if there's any input or output, if there's any files you're going to be dealing with, if you're going to be dealing with any databases. It's the environment in which your program is going to run. So within the environment division, there's another one called the configuration section. You got to spell these right. And the configuration section says what kind of a system is it that this program was meant for. So I'm going to say the source computer. What is the computer that the source code was written in? I'm going to say Mint, and you have to have all the, you can't have spaces in here. Linux x64. I'm running on 21.2, and then end it with a period. Now let's do the next one. The next one is not source computer, the next one is object computer. And since I'm writing them on the same computer, I'm just going to make them both source and object. And again, you have to make sure these line numbers have to increase as you go down. Okay? Then there's sections. So 001 400, and we're going to call this one the input-output section. We're not going to use it, but we're going to leave it there. And we have the file control section. Actually, file control is part of input-output. And we're going to have the I/O control. So these are actually file control and I/O control. These are actually part of the input-output section. Now remember, you have to stay within the A area. So what you could do is you could put some spaces here to kind of show them indented. There's the environment division. And as long as you keep them within that 4 characters or that range, you're okay. And you can always go up there and yep, I'm still in there. Okay? You don't want to use tabs. When you're writing a COBOL program, you do not want to use tabs. You want to use spaces. Now you can change your editor to do that. If you're wondering if you're using spaces or tabs, if I press a tab and then I press the back arrow key, it jumps all the way to the beginning. That means that it is a white space, it is a tab. And I believe in Genie I can go here and show white spaces so I can make sure I don't have any tabs. Let's go ahead and put a couple of tabs. And you can see these lines right here, these arrows, that means those are tabs. Now what you can do is you can go into Edit, Preferences, you can go into Editor, Indentation, and you can click Spaces. And click Apply and OK. Now in Genie I'm going to say Project Apply Default Indentation. So now watch what happens when I press the tab. There's no arrow there anymore, and if I press the left arrow key, it goes 1 character at a time. So instead of doing a tab, it actually did spaces. Now I actually like that a lot. I like to do that, and especially Genie. I'm going to go into Edit Preferences, and I'm going to go over here and make the width, I believe 7, because I would like to get past the line number. Oop, and I have to Project Apply Default Indentation. And now it jumped across all 7 of those characters, so I can just write the code, and then I can put the line numbers in there later. That's one thing. That's one way you can do it. Okay? But the problem with that is every time you do it, it's 7 characters in that case. So I'm just going to use spaces for right now. So that's I/O control. We're going to get more into that. So let's go ahead and put a comment line here, and that should be 1.7. Okay. So the next division is called the data division. This is where you define all of your variables. So I'm going to call it 001-800, and we're going to say data division. 001-900. And within the data division, we have a thing called the file section. We have a thing called the working storage section. We have another thing called the linkage section. And we're going to be talking about all of that as this course moves on. And we're almost there. We're almost there. So we have the linkage section. And then for GNUCobol, there's a supported thing called the report section. And there's also another one called the screen section. So let's talk a little bit about each one of these. So the data division, it specifies all the data. The file section specifies what is the file data that you're going to be pulling out of files or putting into files. So that's what that's for. The working storage section is what is the storage that I'm going to use in my program to get the program done, to actually do the program work. The linkage section is what is the data that's going to be shared between my program and maybe another program, how are they going to link together, or even how am I going to use that to communicate with functions or subroutines that I've written myself. We'll get there, no problem. The report section, you can actually design a report within the code without actually having to write any logic, and then just have the data go into that report definition and it prints out a report. Totally cool. That's one of the benefits of COBOL for businesses. And then the screen section allows you to create like a really nice little data input screen. I've seen some unbelievably sophisticated ones, but like you see at an airport or something, it's not a GUI, it's on the command line, but it looks like it could be a GUI. It's pretty neat. Now, one thing to remember about the report section and the screen section, I'm going to put a comment here. Report and screen sections not available with IBM COBOL x86. When I found that out, I was really, really disappointed. I've been doing COBOL programming since 1977, and the report section and the screen section was always so valuable. Now GNUCobol supports it, which is cool. I've actually written some programs using GNUCobol, and it works pretty good. And we are going to do that in this course. Okay, but let's move on here. Now I'm going to put in another comment line, and now I'm going to put in the last division, and that's called the procedure division. And here's where you actually write your code logic. What do I do to have to display hello world? That's what goes in there. So we'll do another one. And this one I am going to tab. And this is going to be display hello world from GNUCobol. And a period at the end. And then after that, I'm going to type stop run. And stop run means exit the program. It's like returning from main in C or C++ or Java. So there you go. Oh my God. Whew. What a pain in the neck. Well, you know what you can do? You can actually save this file and use it as a template next time you want to create a program. So let me save this, and I'm going to show you how to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say save as. And Linux is pretty cool. I'm going to go into actually under Linux user, I'm going to go into, that's my user ID home folder. I'm going to go into templates, and I'm going to call this one COBOL template. This is one of the things I just love about COBOL, or about Linux, I should say. Okay, so let's say I create a new project. So I'm going to create, I don't know, let's just create temp. And if I go into temp, I right click, I say create document, COBOL template, It sticks it out there. I'm going to call this main.cbl. I'm now going to open it with Genie and look at all of that. It's there and ready to go. So all you have to do is fill in the blanks or make changes. So that's actually pretty cool, I think. Okay, so let's go back to COBOL projects. Let's get rid of temp. And let's go to Hello World 2. Let's edit our program. And now let's go ahead and compile it. Let's compile and run it. So the way I'm going to do this, and I'm going to show you how to do this in a Makefile later on where you can do everything from Genie. But what we're going to do is I'm going to open up a terminal and I'm going to compile this. Now one thing that I actually do like to put into my comments are the compile steps. So compile statement for this program will be, I got to look at my notes, cob2 main.cbl output main. Just main. So that is how you compile it, and I believe, yep, that's it. So that's how you compile it. Now if I want to compile it, compile freeform, which I'll show you in just a moment, you would say cob2 -x. Oh, I should have put a -x here too. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. -free. Now what -free does is it keeps you from having to worry about these sections of your code. And you don't have to put in line numbers. So, but we're not going to do that right away. We're going to go ahead and do this with the non-free form. And I'm going to say main.cbl.omain. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and build it. And luckily I have my little cheat sheet there. cob2-x main.cbl main. And we have a couple of errors, which I'm actually very glad about. And it says here remarks. I think one thing about, oh, no, that's cob2. That's the IBM compiler. Let's try the right one, should be cobc. cobc. Okay, that did it. I'm not sure. Yeah, I've got my. Okay. Oh, you might have said -o main. There we go. That's it. So let me make sure I get that right. I don't know why I had that wrong. That's kind of weird. So okay. So cobc-x. Oh, I did. I must have typed it in wrong. So there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and delete everything about my cob.cbl because I mistakenly ran the IBM compiler. And there's my executable on Linux. So let's go ahead and run it. Voila, hello world from GNUCobol. Pretty good. Now let me show you what happens if let's say I put the identification division way back there. I get rid of the line number and I try to compile it. We get an error. It requires you to write your code in that formatted method. It requires you to write it highly formatted. Now, when I accidentally compiled this using the IBM compiler, we had some errors, but we'll see that in a little while. And you could go ahead and put as many of these lines of code in there as you want. 002.6.10. Let's go ahead and build it. Run it, and there you go. So you got your program going. So now let's look at the freeform method of the compiler. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm going to right click on this and say copy and then paste, and I'm going to rename this to main free. That's CBL. And then I'm going to go ahead and edit it. Now freeform basically means this. You no longer need that template. Everything is basically freeform. Now, one interesting thing though is a full line or a comment has to be the asterisk greater than. I believe it's the asterisk greater than. So I can go in here and I can delete all of this stuff. Now what happens if I don't delete it and I try to compile it as a free? Well, the way you compile it as a free, you simply say -free and enter, and we got a whole bunch of errors. Because when you do the freeform method of compiling, you don't use line numbers. And really, what would I do if I were you? I would probably do it without the line numbers, but you have to remember that the line numbers are useful, and they are on other compilers. And you also don't need any kind of an asterisk at the beginning of the line. You can have empty lines. You can do tabs. You can do white tabs, white space tabs. It's kind of nice. So I'm just going to indent all this, make it nice. So let's get rid of all these. Whoops. And it's asterisk greater than as a comment. Now this is GNUCobol only. You don't have this freedom like in GNUCobol, like you don't have this GNUCobol freedom of coding like in languages like the IBM COBOL, mainly because of compatibility. Now I did set up my editor to be all spaces, so this should run just fine, or compile just fine. And did I save it? Oh, main free .cbl. Let's say main free. There, look at that. It compiled perfectly. I now have two executables, main and main free, and it works the same as main. So I've got two source programs, and both of them basically do the same thing. You don't really need to use the line numbers as you're learning the language, but it's not a bad idea to do that. So there you go. So there's your first COBOL program. I'll bet you never thought you'd be doing that so close to the holiday season in 2023, but there you go. And there's a lot there, but I love that template idea in Linux. Especially Mint Linux allows you to do that, which is why I love Mint Linux. And I can do all kinds of things, create a template file. I could create a main COBOL, a free template, or I could create just a main COBOL that is not free that uses this other feature of using the line numbers. Okay, so now we're on Windows, and I said in the previous video, I might have said that we were going to use a Windows subsystem for Linux, but I think what would be better here is for us to use MSys2, that installation. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you might want to look at the 01 video for COBOL that I did that shows you how to get your entire development environment set up. I'm not going to go through that all here because we actually did it in the previous video. So let's just start writing some code. Okay, so I really have not done anything on this computer yet with COBOL other than installing MSys and also installing COBOL. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Documents and I'm going to create a folder called COBOL. And within there, I'm going to create another folder called Hello World. And then from in there, I need to create a file. So I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to say new. Well, there's not a lot here I can create. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Genie. I'm not sure why it didn't let me create that. I'll open up Genie. And then I'm just going to copy the code that we did in the Linux version. I'm just going to paste it here into my Windows. And then I'm going to save it. And I'm going to navigate to my Documents, COBOL, Hello World, and I'll just make this main.cbl. And notice that when you put the CBL extension on the file name, Genie does things a little bit differently. Things are color-coded and all that. Now we can't compile and execute from Genie just yet. We're going to do that in this course, but not just yet. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my window here where I've got my main.cbl. I'm going to right click and say open in terminal. Now I'm going to type cobc and see what we get. Okay, so cobc is installed. I have set up my path and everything in my PC advanced setting. But to actually compile this, you need to use a special command, which I'll have highlighted here. And you say cobc, but you have to specify -configuration equals, and you have to specify where it's located. Now we can put this all into a script file or all into a make file, so we don't have to type this in every time. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, hey, COBOL compiler, I want you to connect to the default configuration for GNUCobol, which was installed when I installed it on MSys2. The that's what the -conf means. The -x means create an executable file. The name of the source file is main.cbl, and the name of the output file is main.exe. Now you should always end Windows programs with exe. Okay, so I must have typed something in wrong. So let's see what I typed in wrong. It's :/MSys. Oh, nope, sorry. Not, yes, it is. It's MSys64, MinGW64, share, GNUCobol. Oh, here it is. Config. And there you go. So we got no error messages. If I do a dir, you can see that main.cbl and main.exe is there. I'll type main.exe and it says hello world from GNUCobol. Now if I wanted to compile this with the -free, I just say -x space -free, and right now we have a whole lot of errors because we didn't get rid of all of the number lines and all that. Remember, in the free version of the COBOL, you don't have any line numbers. Now, if you do have comments, you have to use the -, and that will be a comment. But you use the -free to compile in such a way that you don't have to have all those specific locations for all of your code. So that's on Windows using MSys. Using the Windows subsystem for Linux is exactly the way that we did the Linux. If you didn't look at the Linux part of this video, please go back and look at it because I explain a lot compared to what I'm explaining here. All I'm showing here is that how to create a folder, how to create the file in there, how to get it all set up, and then how to compile it without using the free, and it compiles just great and the program runs. So there you go, your first COBOL program. We're going to do a lot in this course. We're going to handle every one of those divisions, the sections. We're going to open files. We're going to create random files, direct access files. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do math. We're going to do all kinds of stuff. By the end of this course, you should know enough about COBOL to maybe impress whatever employer might be interviewing you to see what your breadth of your knowledge is of computer science. So with that said, I hope to see you at our next video.